Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers, and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
What's going on, everyone? So the offseason is still unfolding, and while there's been some movement and some decisions made, there's this underlying issue that's starting to become more and more apparent the deeper we get into winter. The front office is clearly trying to figure out the best way to build a roster that can legitimately compete for a championship, but they've hit a roadblock that's making it harder to execute the kind of moves they probably want to make. I want to break down exactly what this problem is, why it matters so much, and what the realistic options are moving forward, because this is something that could shape the entire direction of the next few seasons. Before we dive into all of this, if you're serious about staying on top of every development and getting real analysis instead of just surface level takes, hit that subscribe button right now. Give this video a thumbs up if you appreciate the work that goes into tracking down what's actually happening behind the scenes. Turn on notifications so you're always in the loop when something breaks. And drop your honest thoughts in the comments as we go through this, because I want to know where you stand on some of these decisions that are being made right now. So here's the situation, and it's something that's been bubbling under the surface for a while, but is now becoming impossible to ignore. The payroll is bloated, and the luxury tax bill that just got paid was over $56 million, which is an absolutely massive number. That kind of financial commitment limits what you can do in free agency, and when you've already locked up significant money to bring back a key piece of the lineup, there's just not a ton left in the budget to go out and sign more big-name free agents. So the natural alternative is to look at the trade market and try to find ways to upgrade the roster by moving pieces around instead of just throwing money at problems. But here's where the real issue comes in, and it's something that's starting to impact negotiations in a serious way. The trade chip cupboard is pretty bare right now, and when you're trying to have conversations with other teams about acquiring talent, you need to have assets that the other side actually wants. Right now, the farm system doesn't have the kind of depth that allows the front office to be aggressive in trade talks without giving up one of the few truly valuable prospects they have left. And that's creating a situation where even when there's interest in upgrading certain positions, the pathway to actually making those deals happen is extremely limited. Let's talk specifically about the outfield, because that's where a lot of the focus has been and where there's still significant questions that haven't been answered. There have been some additions already, and there's been some movement, but when you really look at the current setup, it still feels incomplete. You've got a young prospect who's being talked about as a potential long-term answer, but he hasn't faced big league pitching yet, and projecting what someone will do at the major league level based on minor league performance is always a gamble, no matter how talented they are. There's a veteran coming off a down year who has all the tools to bounce back, but needs to actually prove he can rediscover the form that made him valuable in the first place. And then there are other pieces who have specific strengths, but also glaring weaknesses that can be exploited in high leverage situations. The most pressing question mark is still what happens with a veteran who, by all accounts, is not going to be back next season. Everything we're hearing suggests the relationship has deteriorated to a point where a return just isn't realistic. And when you're talking about someone who contributed over 30 home runs and 70-plus RBIs last year, that's real production you're losing. The issue is that finding a way to move him in a trade that actually makes sense has proven to be incredibly difficult. There hasn't been much traction on that front, and the longer it drags on, the more complicated it becomes. According to reports that have come out recently, the team has been poking around on potential trades for center fielders, and some of the names that have been mentioned include guys who would be solid upgrades, but nothing earth-shattering. These aren't the elite tier options. These are more bargain bin type targets that would provide some stability but wouldn't fundamentally change the ceiling of the roster. And even with those more modest targets, the ability to actually complete deals has been hampered by the lack of young pitching to include in trade packages. Other teams want controllable arms, and when you don't have that to offer, it significantly diminishes your leverage in negotiations. Let's talk about the farm system for a second, because this is really at the heart of the issue. At the top of the prospect rankings, there's a pitcher who the organization believes could be a future ace, and there's been a lot of hype around him over the last couple years. but he's coming off a season where he posted an ERA over 5 in AAA, and while there are legitimate reasons for that performance, including coming back from surgery and adjusting to higher levels of competition, the reality is his trade value has probably dipped from where it was a year or two ago. Teams are going to be more skeptical about what they're getting, and that makes him harder to move, even if the organization wanted to include him in a deal. Beyond that top pitcher, there are a couple other highly regarded prospects, including an infielder and an outfielder who both have significant upside. The outfielder is almost certainly going to be in the big league lineup to start the season, which takes him off the table for trade discussions entirely. The infielder is interesting because while he's clearly talented, there's not an obvious pathway for him to crack the major league roster anytime soon. Given the players currently occupying the positions he can play. That makes him potentially the most logical trade chip of the top prospects, but even then, the front office seems reluctant to move him. What's interesting is that the reputation coming in was that the front office would be extremely aggressive about dealing prospects to acquire win-now talent. That's what happened at previous stops, and it led to championships. So the expectation was that the farm system would be completely gutted in pursuit of adding veterans. But that really hasn't been the case here. If anything, there's been more caution about holding on to top prospects than most people expected. And while that's admirable in some ways, it also creates the current situation where the trade market is difficult to navigate because you don't have expendable assets. The issue with the infielder prospect specifically is that the path to playing time is extremely murky. The shortstop position is locked down long-term with a star player who isn't going anywhere. Third base has a player who made an all-star game, and while there were tons of trade rumors about him last offseason, things have gone completely quiet on that front this year. And second base has a young player who was supposed to be the long-term answer but has now regressed in back-to-back seasons. His defense is elite, but the bat hasn't developed the way it needs to for him to be an impact player on a championship roster. So if you believe the infielder prospect has real potential to be an impact big leaguer, you have to figure out how to create a pathway for him, and that probably means moving one of the current players at those positions. But finding trade partners who are willing to take on the contracts and give back value in return has proven difficult. The reality is that unless you can find a clear upgrade at one of those spots, you're probably just running it back with the same group and hoping the prospect can eventually force his way into the lineup through performance. The bottom line is that the team is in a position where they have to maximize value with minimal assets to work with. The budget constraints are real. The farm system doesn't have the depth to be aggressive in trades without giving up core pieces, and there are still significant roster questions that need answers. The outfield situation isn't fully resolved. There's still uncertainty about what happens at catcher, and the bullpen could use another arm or two. These are real issues that can't just be ignored and hoping everything works itself out. What makes this even more complicated is that this is a team that's won 95-plus games in back-to-back years, but has been eliminated in the first round of the playoffs both times. So clearly the roster is good enough to compete during the regular season, but when the games matter most in October, they've come up short. That suggests they need to upgrade the talent level to get over that hump. But the pathways to doing that are limited right now, given the financial and prospect capital constraints they're operating under. I don't think the situation is as dire as some people are making it out to be, but it's definitely a real challenge that the front office has to navigate carefully. They can't afford to stand pat and just hope things break their way, but they also can't mortgage the future by giving up every valuable prospect they have left. It's a delicate balance, and the decisions made over the next few weeks are going to have major implications for how competitive this team can be, not just next season, but for the next several years. So here's what I want to know from you. Do you think the front office should be more aggressive about moving top prospects to upgrade the roster right now? Or do you think holding on to that young talent and trying to find value at the margins is the smarter long-term approach? And what do you do about the infield logjam where you've got a valuable prospect with no clear path to playing time? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because these are complicated questions with no easy answers, and I want to hear where you stand. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because We're going to be tracking every move as this offseason continues to unfold. There's still a lot that can happen, and you don't want to miss it when things start moving. I'll catch you in the next one.